Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Dan Hiscock, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Sergeant Kitson Harcher. Today we commemorate the 105th anniversary of the Battle of Mont and Quentin. On this day, 105 years ago, three badly depleted battalions of the 5th Australian Brigade attacked and captured a small hill called Mont and Quentin. The Australian Corps had been pushing on since the Battle of Amiens was launched on 8th of August, and these battalions had made their way across the plains and marshes, clearing German-held positions along the way to the base of the hill. They were exhausted and had little artillery to support them, but the hill stood in their way and their commanding officer, Lieutenant General John Monash, ordered them to capture it. At 5 a.m. on the 31st of August 1918, a force of around 1,300 Australians stormed the hill, screaming like bushrangers, and forced the Germans from the heights in a feat that is often called the AIF's finest achievement. The capture of Mont and Quentin cost the 5th Brigade more than a third of its fighting strength, but it opened the way to the capture of Peron and beyond. The commanding officer of the British 4th Army, Lieutenant General Sir Henry Rawlinson, said of the Australians' actions at Mont and Quentin, "It is indeed a magnificent performance and no praise is too high for them." Today we remember the Battle of Mont and Quentin. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Return and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Service Clubs Association. And we welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. Thank you. If you wish to and you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read just one of the stories from the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Lieutenant Selwyn Ray Dickson. Selwyn Dickson was born in Beechworth, Victoria on the 6th of April, 1891, the eldest of 4 children born to William and Jane Dickson. Selwyn received his education at Melbourne Scott College, where he was a keen student and a member of the cadets program. He later won a scholarship to Mont College at the University of Melbourne, where he studied a Bachelor of Law. He was admitted to the Supreme Court of Victoria as a solicitor in August 1914, just as the First World War broke out in Europe. After less than a year of practicing law, Dickson enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 15th of November 1915. He was assigned to reinforcements of the 22nd Battalion and commenced training. In April 1916, he was sent to the Royal Military College, Duntroon, to commence officer training. On completion, he received a commission and was appointed to the rank of Second Lieutenant later that year. Shortly before he was due to embark, Dickson began suffering from appendicitis and was discharged from the AIF. He returned home for a period of recovery, during which time he proposed to his sweetheart, Marion Brown. By February 1917, Dickson had regained his health and enlisted for a second time. Appointed to reinforcements of the 21st Battalion with the rank of Second Lieutenant, he embarked for active service in November, sailing from Melbourne on the troop ship Nestor. Lieutenant Dickson disembarked in Southampton, England on the 24th of January 1918. By the time he arrived, he was again suffering from appendicitis. In a near critical state, he was transferred to hospital for emergency surgery. As a result, Dickson did not join his unit at the front until July 1918. Dickson's arrival on the Western Front came in the wake of the enemy's spring offensive, which had failed to make any significant progress. With the enemy now badly defeated, Allied forces took the opportunity to launch an offensive of their own. This began on the 8th of August and led to a string of rapid and devastating blows to German forces, which were pushed further back towards their final lines of defence. By the end of the month, Allied forces were within reach of the Hindenburg Line, facing German troops at their stronghold on Mont St. Quentin, overlooking the Somme River and the town of Peronne. Mont St. Quentin stood out in the landscape and was a perfect observation point in the area of strategic importance. Dickson and his men would be among those tasked with taking the area. Crossing the Somme River on the 31st of August 1918, they began their attack on German positions at 5 a.m, fighting uphill and across open ground. the troops were vulnerable to attack from the enemy, which held the high ground. The Australians carried out a coordinated attack on the enemy's positions, which allowed them to capture the village of Mont and Quentin within 2 hours. By midnight, they had captured hundreds of prisoners as well as enemy guns. The following morning, German forces regrouped and launched a counterattack on Allied lines. On the 1st of September, Dickson and his men were confronted with heavy fighting as the enemy fought desperately to regain lost ground. After heavy shelling and hand-to-hand combat, Australian forces were eventually outnumbered and pushed back off the summit of Mont St. Quentin. More men were sent to reinforce these units, and with their help, the Australians recaptured their objectives. Their success came at a heavy cost, with more than 3,000 casualties sustained in 2 days of fighting. Among the dead was Lieutenant Selwyn Dickson, who was killed by a shell during the enemy's counterattack. The commanding officer of the 21st Battalion later described Dickson saying, "He was an officer of exceptional type and promise, with great capabilities in handling men." Lieutenant Selwyn Dickson was 27 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour to my right among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lieutenant Selwyn Ray Dickson, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We'll leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub of Gallipoli with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony on behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorials Development Project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.